So today I'm going to do a follow-up video sort of to the video that I did about feminism versus MRAs. Some of the comments that I got were sort of provocative and got me thinking along different lines and about different things that I hadn't said on the subject and wanted to say. So basically this video is going to be about feminism as it relates to government. Yeah, I think that's an important issue. It seemed like a lot of the men that were responding to my feminism, versus MRA video, were basically telling me that they weren't so much opposed to the idea of female equality. It's just they had a problem with the way that feminism had affected government institutions and how that had, in their mind, created a sort of a favorable toward women sort of status quo as far as government institutions were concerned. And I think that that is actually a valid idea for people to have. I do think that women do get favoritism as far as child custody goes, and you could, I suppose, say or assume or maybe even statistically determine that women are more loving caretakers, that we are closer to our children emotionally, that men who fight for custody tend to do so for selfish reasons, yada yada yada. But even if that is true 51% of the time, it still means that in some cases, assuming that the woman is going to be a better custodian to the children, is going to create an injustice to a large portion of men. Because I certainly do not think that it's true that every mother is a more fit parent than every father. I mean, that's just a given. So if you assume that mothers are better caretakers than fathers just across the board, unless the mother goes out of her way to do something horrible, that's going to lead to some bad outcomes and some bitterness. And if that is the case, then I can certainly understand why a lot of people would be angry about that and bitter about that. So anyway, I wanted, like I said, to talk about feminism as it relates to government. And basically the way I see this coming down, when you talk about men and women tend to rely on their verbal skills and sort of their emotional attributes to get what they want. Because they are, in general, they have inferior upper body strength, they are forced to rely on other means to get what they want in life. And I see it as a sort of I'm sure you've probably heard of the term might makes right. And basically what that talks about is the fact that the strongest person, at least not necessarily the strongest person, the person who is really willing to make a stand and willing to dig in their heels sometimes in order to get what they want, is usually the person that ends up getting what they want. And unfortunately, when it comes to physical strength, men and women are not equally matched. and therefore women are forced to circumvent that by relying on legal institutions, for example, and seeking to change legal institutions in order to make sure that any injustices they face get redressed, because they cannot do that themselves. And then there may be cases where you have a man who is of the opinion that he should never take advantage of his superior physical strength, and therefore never would strike a woman no matter how many times she strikes him. I'm really not even trying to say that men are always the ones that are going to be the more physically aggressive or have the advantage when it comes to, hand-to-hand combat. There are some cases, I think, where a man would simply, by his morals, be forced to circumvent, taking care of the situation himself, would be, not wanting to use physical force to get what he wants, but rather would want to go through some sort of legal system to get what he wants. As far as custody, if you're having children and there's a dispute as far as who should take care of the children. I've looked back on history, or just what I've known of history, looked back in my mind, and the times when feminism has been very active, where women have been really trying to organize and campaign, at least how it's highlighted in history books as far as when they've been trying to organize and campaign. Obviously I wasn't there. I'm relying on secondhand information to find out what happened back then, but it seems to me that during times of other social turmoil, like for example around the Civil War period, and then again around the period of World War I, there was a lot of push for women to get more rights. And then again, obviously in the 1960s, when you had a lot of people protesting the Vietnam War and marijuana prohibition, just to name a few of the things that the government was doing that people disagreed with. All of a sudden you had, it kind of seems like to me too convenient, like the reason that feminist demands were finally caved into was not actually to give women more rights, but simply to give the government more power. And I really feel that that is what it has done. And it was a person that basically said to me that he didn't feel that MRAs really had problems with individual women, that they really had a problem with the way that feminism had manipulated government into favoring women unfairly, is why a lot of people had a negative opinion of feminism. And I can kind of I can understand that, actually. And I guess really, because my point of view is that the government is not my friend. Even though I can understand that the government can be used in order to do some good things, I think in general the government is a very blunt instrument that, while it can be used to do some very good things, tends to behave very indiscriminately, and once it is given extra powers, tends to use those powers for bad more than for good. And while you may have some injustices being corrected, you're also going to create a whole slew of other injustices because of the additional power that government has been given. I think it's just an unfortunate fact about human nature, that, you know, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Like I said, I can understand why women would turn to the government in order to reach some of the goals, because we don't have the physical force on a one-on-one level to get done what we want to get done, generally speaking. But I guess I've talked about this in previous videos about how child custody is giving the power for government to decide child custody is giving the government the ultimate power over people. And I saw this on a TV show one day where a guy was talking about this, where he talked about how he didn't think that the government should be given that power. And it was really compelling, and the more that I have thought about this, the more it makes sense. Because people will do anything for their children. You know, when you, and this actually brings up another dispute that I had with an MRA person, where he was basically talking about how he felt like men should have the ability to, once they make a baby with a woman, because women have the ability to have abortions, that men should have the ability to just sign off and walk away from that child and not have any legal responsibility whatsoever. And I really had a problem with that, because I really didn't think that that was fair. Because, you know, men don't have to undergo any kind of hormonal changes when it comes to pregnancy, or invasive surgical procedure to get rid of that pregnancy. You know, it's really not a 50-50, any sort of reasonable comparison to compare a man walking away from a child that he's fathered to a woman's right to have an abortion. Sorry, nowhere close can you compare those two things. But when he talked about that, it made me think that it's really a person's desire to walk away from the fact that when you have a child with someone, when you have intercourse with someone, especially when you have a child with someone, ultimately you are involving yourself with that person for the next 18 years, potentially. And you know, when women try to take full custody away from a man who maybe is really close to his children, just to be spiteful because maybe he cheated on her, or she just wants the money, or whatever the reason. I mean, I sort of see that as her wanting to wash her hands of the person that she chose to make children with, or maybe use him, or maybe make his life miserable. And it's sort of the same impulse, I think, that some men have to walk away from the women that they've made babies with and make their lives miserable by having to raise the children completely by themselves. And either way, it's just not right. And while I don't believe the government should have the responsibility of making custody decisions over children, because I just think that gives the government too much power, and I think that it's just too important. basically what it breaks down to is that people need to be more careful about who they have sex with and who they make babies with. And you need to really think about, what kind of person is this? You know, and what kind of parent are they going to be, and are they going to be reasonable when it comes to custody? Are they really going to care about their child, or are they going to be a selfish jerk and just want what they want and not care about anything else? Of course, you can't always anticipate that, but you have to try. You have to make more of an effort, and I think people need to make more of an effort. Anyway, that was my thoughts about feminism and the government. Thank you.